Hello, I'm Dr. Craig Childress. I'm a clinical psychologist in Southern California. And in this video segment, I'm going to be discussing my consultation to family law attorneys. Now, as a family law attorney representing your client associated with this type of pathology, so your client is being rejected by the child and it's causing disruptions to the custody schedule, the family pathology that you're dealing with is an attachment related pathology. The attachment system is the brain system for love and bonding throughout the lifespan. So a child rejecting a parent is an attachment pathology. In addition, it's occurring around an attachment related event, the divorce, which is a separation of a spousal attachment bond. So we have an attachment related event creating attachment related pathology in the child. And so a lot of times within the forensic psychology field, they will refer to this as parental alienation. That's a term out of forensic psychology. That's not a construct in clinical psychology. So as we move from forensic to clinical, we're going to be discontinuing the use of that construct, and we're going to be shifting it over to attachment related pathology. Now let me explain a little bit about the psychology field generally. There's two basic fields that will be interacting with your client and with your legal work. The first is forensic psychology. This is the field that you're most familiar with. This is the child custody evaluators, the reunification therapists, parenting coordinators. All of those people are in the forensic psychology domain. The other domain is clinical psychology. That's what I do. I'm a clinical psychologist. We treat, assess, diagnose, and treat all the other types of pathology: ADHD, oppositional defiant disorder, school problems, autism, everything else. That's clinical psychology. Forensic psychology is anything that's court involved. So for example, autism could be clinical psychology. If it becomes court involved, then we might be into forensic psychology. Now, in my mind, forensic psychology is more of a procedural field. They don't really have content to it. It's just how do you go about doing the things that we do in forensic related practice, like a child custody evaluation. Whereas clinical psychology is grounded in certain knowledge base. So there's a knowledge base about attachment theory. There's a knowledge base about personality disorders. There's a knowledge base about family systems. And then what we do is we get a symptom presentation. Something comes into our practice, and then we apply the knowledge, the information sets from professional psychology to be able to solve the pathology. That's what we do in clinical psychology. Over here in forensic psychology, I'm not quite sure what they do. So I'm going to defer talking about what they do over here because I think they don't apply any of the standard information sets from professional psychology. They have sort of exempted themselves from clinical psychology and instead kind of start making stuff up, which is what they have with parental alienation. That's a term out of forensic psychology, parental alienation. It's not a construct or a term in clinical psychology. I went through my entire career in clinical psychology, never heard the term until I tracked a case over into forensic practice, and then all of a sudden I learned about this parental alienation thing. It's not something that actually exists in clinical psychology. So what I'm doing, what we are doing with an attachment-based model of parental alienation, it represents the return of clinical psychology to court-involved practice. So it may seem unfamiliar to you and to the court for a little time, the various assessment protocols or the approach of clinical psychology to the pathology in the family of your client. But that's not because it's new. It's standard clinical psychology. It's just new to the court and to the court-involved practice because clinical psychology has not been over here doing anything. That has to do with about the 1980s. Clinical psychology was banished from forensic practice. If I make a custody recommendation to the court, I'll lose my license. Now, everybody over here in forensic psychology thinks this is about child custody. It's not. It's about a family conflict. It's about attachment pathology. It's about the what's called pathological mourning. It's inability to process sadness that's locking up the family and preventing their transition to a healthy, separated family structure. And I will describe all of that in various video segments about the clinical psychology understanding of the pathology. It's not about child custody. Custody is a symptom of the underlying conflicts and issues within the family. Now, custody is actually pretty simple. There's two models. There's 50-50 if you want to give equal division to both parents, and there's every other weekend, one day during the week, if you want to give primacy to one parent. Those are essentially your two models. So you have 50-50 or every other weekend, one day during the week. And you can do little variants of them, but that's basically your two models. So custody isn't a big complicated thing. Move-aways, you have various types of things that can add complexity. But for the most part, 50-50 every other weekend. The complexity comes from the child's rejection of a parent, from all the family stuff, from all the attachment-related pathology that's kind of activating in the family. The other aspect to understand out of clinical psychology is the role of personality disorder pathology in creating the conflict. About 6% of the population has narcissistic personality disorder. About 6% of the population has borderline personality pathology. So that means we can expect about 10 to 15% of the population of divorces to contain a narcissistic or a borderline personality. So when we look over to divorce, where do we see that 10 to 15% of the narcissistic and borderline personality pathology? Well, the high conflict cases. So the cases that are coming into the court system and coming to you, and because they can't be resolved in the high, those are very likely the ones that contain a narcissistic or borderline personality. And there's other reasons to suspect that as well. So it is important that as we move forward, that we understand the level of severity in the pathology. Now, narcissistic and borderline personalities are actually attachment problems. So once we go over to clinical psychology and attachment event, creating attachment pathology, the narcissistic borderline flows into that. We will actually wind up redefining or translating the pathology of the narcissist and borderline into attachment trauma. That's the source origin. Attachment trauma produces a personality pathology that then produces the family conflict and the family display. So traditionally, you've only had one option for your client, or the courts only had one option, which is out of forensic psychology. And what the option that they give you for court-involved consultation with psychology is the child custody evaluation, because they think it's about custody. So if you go down that route of engaging professional psychology, it's going to be a child custody evaluation. I'm sure you're familiar with those. And it's going to be around the words parental alienation and the flip side of that construct, which is justified estrangement. Both of those constructs are stuff they've made up over here. They're not real pathologies in clinical psychology. Clinical psychology does not have a construct for parental alienation. We don't have one for justified estrangement. They don't exist in clinical psychology. They are made up over here. They are very poorly defined. They're really, really problematic. But that's what you're going to get on a child custody evaluation. In addition, the child custody evaluation is going to take about 6 to 9 months, and it's going to cost between $20,000 to $40,000. And that's pretty much the only option you have for getting professional input into the case, because clinical psychologists have been banned from providing any sort of input to the court on child custody. Well, what I'm doing as a clinical psychologist, and what we're doing here, is we're bringing back clinical psychology to court-involved assessment, a court-involved treatment of pathology, and court-involved consultation regarding the family pathology. So clinical psychology is returning to court-involved practice. Now, one of the implications of that, though, is we are not going to be talking about custody. Custody is over here. This is that. If you're worried about custody, that's a forensic psychology evaluation, and that's a different thing than we're talking about. What we're going to be bringing and offering to the court is an alternative assessment protocol, alternative information, not about custody, not about, we're going to be offering information about the family pathology. And essentially, here's the referral question that clinical psychology will be answering. Which parent is the source of pathogenic parenting creating the child's attachment-related pathology, and what are the treatment implications? So notice the structure of that sentence. Which parent is the source of pathogenic parenting? So that's a key word, a key phrase, pathogenic parenting. So we're going to be enlisting that phrase as we move forward. Which parent is the source of pathogenic parenting, creating pathology in the child, creating the attachment-related pathology, the bonding rejection of the child? And so we're going to identify that, and then we're going to give the court the treatment implications of that. Now, in clinical psychology, we're going to answer that question, which parent is causing the attachment-related pathology of the child, using two instruments. The first is a parenting practices rating scale. That's going to document the parenting practices of the targeted rejected parent, your client. And essentially it's going to be on four items, four scales. Child abuse, and so there's a bunch of child abuse categories. Just under child abuse, really bad parenting, and so there's a bunch of categories that they're kind of really, really problematic parenting. Then normal range problematic parenting and normal range healthy parenting. And so it's going to divide up into two sets. Levels 1 and 2 are abusive parenting that would account for the child's potential bonding difficulties with that parent because that parent's abusive. The second level, though, the levels 3 and 4, are normal range parenting and could not account for the child's attachment, bonding, rejection. So that's one instrument. We're going to start with the parenting practices rating scale. In addition, the other instrument is the diagnostic checklist for pathogenic parenting, and that's looking at 3 symptoms. Then these 3 symptoms always emerge when one parent tries to use the child as a weapon against the other parent. The weaponization of that child will leave 3 telltale symptoms in the child's symptom display. Attachment bonding suppression toward a normal range parent, first symptom. You never see that. You never see a child rejecting a normal range parent. You don't see that. So that's the first symptom. Second symptom is we're going to see 5 narcissistic personality traits in the child's symptom display. And those represent the psychological fingerprints of control by the narcissistic parent. We can't control a child without leaving fingerprints of our control in the child's symptom display. So those are the 5 narcissistic symptoms in the child's display. They are actually the attitudes of the allied narcissistic parent that are being transferred to the child. Then the third symptom is an encapsulated persecutory delusion in the child that they believe they're being victimized by the normal range parenting. And so there's a victimization theme that's moving through. That's not true. The normal range parent, but the child has this fixed and false belief that they're being victimized. Again, that's coming from the attitudes of the allied parent. So if we get the normal range parent on a parenting practices rating scale and these 3 symptoms on the diagnostic checklist, it's a lock solid conclusion as to who's causing the pathology. It has to be coming from the allied parent. And in clinical psychology, the definition of the pathology, so you can hear it, the clinical definition of the pathology is the child is being triangulated into the spousal conflict through the formation of a cross-generational coalition against the targeted parent, resulting in an emotional cutoff in the child's relationship with the targeted parent. That's the clinical description of the pathology. It's from family systems therapy. And so we don't use the term parental alienation. That's not what we're looking for. That's not what we're doing. Now, the forensic evaluation is going to take 6 to 9 months. It's going to cost $20,000 to $40,000. The clinical psychology assessment will take about 6 to 8 weeks. It'll take 6 weeks, 6 sessions. We can actually pull it into maybe 2 weeks or 4 weeks on a rush, but 6 sessions. How long does it take to do those? And we'll say 6 to 8 weeks. So it'll take about 6 to 8 weeks to complete for a cost of about $2,500, $2,000. So $2,000, 6 to 8 weeks, $20,000 to $40,000, 6 to 9 months. So that's the options that your client has, that you have, and that the court has available to it, is to seek a clinical psychology assessment of the pathology around the referral question: which parent is causing the child's attachment-related pathology, and what are the treatment implications? Or you can seek a custody evaluation for $20,000 to $40,000 about what the child's custody should be. So that's the choice. Now, there is a handout that I have up on my website for family law attorneys and your clients regarding my recommended approach, which is to get the clinical psychology evaluation. If there's more help or consultation that I can provide to you and your client as you go forward seeking a clinical psychology assessment protocol rather than forensic, give me a call, send me an email, and we'll see if we can work something out.